must not know about me. You must not know about me. I can have another you in a minute. And in fact, he'll be here in a minute, baby. What? It's 2007. Roll the intro.
2007 was a bit of a blur for me personally, but I do remember a couple of things about that general time of my life. I remember getting into trouble at school for hitting kids who verbally abused me, I remember the death of one of my cats, and I remember going to a couple middle school dance parties where I was exposed to some of the pop and rap at the time. I think I forgot a lot of it, but some of it did come rushing back to me when I listened to this year-end, and I gotta say, wow, the mid-2000s must have been pretty cringy. Yeah, some of that naturally comes down to songs from a decade ago feeling more dated, but there's also the look and feel of some of these music videos. Just wow. And now that I've gained a newfound cynicism for a time that I used to call my own, let's do what we always do and complain about the worst of the worst. These are the top 10 worst hit songs of 2007. Number 10.
Lonely, I'm Mr. Lonely.
The charts for most of the 2000s belonged in part to Akon, and in hindsight, that kinda baffles me. In a post-Akon pop world, I think I've yet to come across someone who didn't think he was complete crap.
Though, admittedly, he does have his moments.
He appeared on the year-end for 2007 several times, and I didn't hate everything he touched. It was fine on Bartender, I Tried was probably made all the better because of him, and he also produced The Sweet Escape. Can't take that away from him.
And yet this year, one of his biggest hits was also one of his worst.
I see you whining and grinding up on that pole.
I knew about this song long before I actually sat down to listen to it myself, similarly to Tonight I'm Loving You, which is always a good sign, and yet I kinda came out not hating it quite as much as I expected to, though I do still hate it a lot. It's creepy and over the top, yeah, but I've heard the 2005 year-end, so this is nothing new to me.
But even with that in mind, this is just unbearable.
You already know I wanna fuck you.
You don't need me to tell you that the chorus line is incredibly invasive and too direct. I know this already, you know this already. If I were the stripper in the situation, I'd probably feel incredibly violated, even despite it being my job to show my body to horny men.
I complain on Twitter often about how badly retail employees are treated, but clearly strippers have it worse. They have to be in Akon songs after all.
But ignoring that, what sinks this song the most for me is how treble-heavy the production is. Akon's range is already pretty high, so it's a bad idea to pair him with a beat made of music boxes with little to no bass to speak of. There's no balance whatsoever, which just adds to the creepiness. And it clashes pretty horribly with the content, since it appears to try to give off an innocent vibe. And Akon is far from innocent. This is the kind of beat Neo should be using for a song about strippers, not dirty, dirty convict Akon.
I mean, imagine if She Knows had a beat like this. It would still probably suck, but it would make sense, I guess.
Not only that, but Akon's delivery seems almost childlike in a way, from the melodies to just how vulnerable he tries to sound. But of course that gets thrown out the window when he reminds you that he likes your butt.
Baby, you got a fatty, the type I like to marry.
Aw, isn't that sweet? He wants to marry her because he likes her ass. Gag me.
Money in the air as Mofil, grab you by your coattail.
Oh, and Snoop Dogg is here. I will give him this. He fits this beat better than Akon does, since he's got some charisma and bass in his voice. I still wouldn't call his verse anything special, though, or even good at all, especially when he outs himself as a peeping Tom.
You can't see me, but I can see you.
Oh god, you're such a creep, Snoop.
With attitudes like this, you would think that strippers would kick these two in the nuts more often. But no. Instead, they get them a #1 hit at the beginning of the year. Because that makes sense.
Number 9.
I've been fucking hoes and popping pillies, man, I feel just like a rock star.
To be honest, I don't even know why this is on here. I don't even think it's that bad.
But rules are rules, so here goes.
So the beat is,
Wait, hold up. This song came out in 2017, not 2007, so that can't be right. Let me just, check my script here, and, yeah, it's right here. Rockstar by Nickelback. Oh no.
Cause we all just wanna be big rock stars and live in hilltop houses.
So, fun fact, this was the first Nickelback song that I ever hated. It wasn't How You Remind Me, it wasn't Saving You, it wasn't even Photograph. In fact, there was a time where I actually kind of liked Photograph. No, it was this one.
I remember exactly where I was when I first heard this, too. My brother and I found a parody of Neil Cicierega's Potter Puppet Pals, where the characters basically reenacted the song as it played. Yeah, early YouTube was weird like that. And after the fact, my brother would use parts of this song to bother me constantly. He knew I hated it, but he didn't care. Plus, he also did this with Crank That, so yeah, 2007 and 2008 were not good years to be me.
But this was a good time to be Nickelback, who notched 3 songs on this year-end, despite All the Right Reasons coming out 2 years earlier in 2005. Not bad for a band the internet hates. I'm gonna be honest there.
As for me specifically, I hate this song on principle alone. The idea that a guy like Chad Kroeger feels the need to complain about how he wants it better is kind of infuriating. Prior to this album, Nickelback had the biggest song of 2002, and had continued Hot 100 success up to and during the All the Right Reasons era. And yet it's not enough. He's gotta rattle off a grocery list of impossibly extravagant things just to feel like he could have it better.
And keep in mind, he frames himself as a nobody in this song.
I'm through standing in line, the clubs I'll never get in. It's like the bottom of the ninth, and I'm never gonna win.
Again, this doesn't work when you're the frontman of one of the biggest bands of all time. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is supposed to be a way to relate to his fans? The kind of people who can often daydream about having a glamorous life? Yeah, I don't buy that, because if that were the case, he'd tone it back with what he actually wants.
Bathroom I can play baseball in. A credit card that's got no limit. Front door key to the Playboy Mansion.
Well then, maybe it's supposed to be a joke, and if that's the case, what's the joke? That people like to aim too high? Is that it?
If this is a way to relate to the common people, it's incredibly insulting in that regard. And if it's a joke, it's one without a punchline. It's basically lose-lose.
And like most Nickelback songs, this just plain sounds bad.
Chad in this song sounds particularly whiny, mostly due to the subject matter, almost like he's a child begging for his parents to get him candy at a store checkout. And the fact that Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top provides backing vocals for this, basically enabling Chad's luxury porn addiction, eats me up inside because I really like ZZ Top. They're hard rock legends, which makes their endorsement of this generic, sludgy post-grunge anthem infuriating.
You tried, Chad Kroeger, but you're no Post Malone. Oh my god, that sounded so dirty coming out of my mouth. I need soap.
Number 8.
Only thing that keeps me up when I'm feeling down.
One of the main reasons a decade can seem dated or cringy in hindsight is because of the slang. Slang and memes move very quickly, and that definitely doesn't help the popular music of the time age well.
Case in point, the word Shawty.
Something about this word is just incredibly cringy to me. Like how some think the word groovy is dated and lame, I just think this word is just flat out ugly. It's supposed to address a girl you like, and yet it sounds like an insult. And it was everywhere on this year-end, with 4 songs, even including the word in the title somewhere. Okay, in one case it actually uses the word shorty, but potato.
So, with my weird diatribe against certain words, it's no surprise that one of these songs made my list.
Even though I'm not your man, you're not my girl, I'ma call you my Shawty.
Who would have thought that even a decade later, Plies would still be a thing somehow?
Actually, before we get to Plies himself, I want to talk a bit about T-Pain, another artist who had a lot of songs on the 2007 year-end. Most of them pretty bad. He's not always entirely to blame for that, but here he kinda is. His auto-tune here is kinda messy and all over the place, which I guess is usually true when T-Pain is on a song, but here it feels particularly unpleasant for some reason. Maybe partially because he's trying to be earnest and romantic, but instead it comes off as cartoonish and goofy.
And yet the parts where he sings the title of the song have considerably less passion.
I'ma call you my Shawty.
When he says the word Shawty, the lead vocals cut out and you're only left with the muffled backing vocals. Like, come on, this should be the moment where you're the most passionate, not the least.
Though, if I had to say a word like this all the time on my music, I would probably feel dead inside too, so I really don't blame him, I guess.
And we ain't did nothing that we ain't supposed to do.
And there goes the main artist's credibility before he even says anything. Speaking of which,
Soon as I seen the shit, told I paid for it.
I'm not the target demographic of Thugs Need Love songs by any means, but even I can tell when they fall flat on their face, and this definitely does. Plies is somewhere in the Meek Mill school of fake shouting most of his bars, which makes his attempt to woo this girl feel oddly threatening, and also very annoying. This guy's got an incredibly annoying voice.
Now she an animal, I got a sex game right.
even taking this in a sexual context, I don't think the girl that he just met is gonna take this all that well. Oh, and also a few lines later, he explains why this is a bad idea.
Don't usually do this, I don't fuck on the first night. Cause after I beat you, babe, I'm liable to fuck up your whole life.
Yep, because you slept with her the day you met her, she's cursed. Way to go, asshole.
And not only is he inconsiderate, he's also a moron.
She proud to be fucking me, cause I'm stunting on him.
Oh, she's proud to be sleeping with you, eh? Well, then why is she running away?
Remember she used to run from me, now she like pain.
Basically what I get from this song is that Plies is a clueless meathead who doesn't know a thing about romance or what girls like, so his attempts to gush about his girl are just idiotic at best and concerning at worst.
But you know what? At least he was trying to be romantic, which is more than I can say for this next song. Seamless transition.
Lloyd did the chorus on Bedrock. That's all I know about him and all I want to know about him. I didn't talk about the beats on the Plies song because there's really nothing to say about it beyond it being your typical romantic rap beat. This, on the other hand, deserves some scrutiny because it paints the entire song in a much more sinister context than I think was intended.
First off, just listen to those wine glass synths.
This sparse melody is in a minor key. Composing what's supposed to be a love song in a minor key was a bad decision. And I'm certain it's not even a decision that only this song has, but god does it just hurt everything.
And you know how I feel about songs being tense when they don't need to be.
Not to mention this has a similar problem to I Wanna Love You, with not much bass to balance out Lloyd's high delivery. Well, it does have some bass in there, it kinda has to in order to sound creepy to begin with, but it still makes a lot of the song feel like empty space, which is obviously not a good thing.
As for the content, again, this should read like a simple hookup, but it doesn't.
With how sinister this sounds, it feels like the girl Lloyd's talking to is his prey. I mean, thankfully there's not really anything in the lyrics that explicitly suggests that the girl isn't interested or is scared of him, but it's still not hard to have that interpretation.
And the cherry on top is that awful one-line hook.
This is just obnoxious. Gotta hammer that awful word into the song more and more, I guess, complete with a girl who says it with the most irritating inflections imaginable.
Plus you got those backing vocals from Lloyd on the hook that are basically just hitting random notes on the scale.
Yep, that's a melody, alright. Maybe. I don't know.
And then he raps.
Jeans tight, high heels, this is how you make me feel.
With how high the guy's voice is, I don't think he's a convincing ladies' man while he's singing, and he's even less one when he's rapping.
Are you the daughter of Frankie Beverly?
And you don't get brownie points for name-dropping an obscure R&B singer that your core audience won't recognize.
Shawty got me geeked up.
Oh, so like Urkel?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but thank you, Justin Bieber. Thank you for killing the word shoddy with Eenie Meenie. My gratitude knows no bounds. Number 6. Hip-hop has a long, disturbingly proud tradition of comparing sex to candy. Why does hip-hop have a long, disturbingly proud tradition of comparing sex to candy? I like candy, and this music feels like it's trying to turn me off of candy. There's one time in history where I thought this concept was done passably, and it was by Jason Derulo just last year.
And then you have...
Behold, the sequel to My Humps that nobody wanted, but somehow became a smash hit anyway. By far, this was the song I was dreading the most on this year-end, and as it turns out, that dread was warranted. Though I'll admit that, by a smidge, this wasn't as bad as I was expecting, this still hurt. Like a lot of Fergie's solo material, most of her solo stuff seems to have this tinge of intentional awfulness, with bratty and obnoxious attitudes, and beats that are in your face with just how tasteless they are.
And this song is no exception. In fact, next to MILF Money, I might actually consider this her worst song.
Listen up, y'all, cause this is it.
Let's start with will.i.am, since his involvement with this song basically just makes this a Black Eyed Peas song. His beat is kinda nightmarish, with that main melody sounding like buzzing bees, not to mention how blubbery the bass is on the verses. You do realize this song is supposed to be about sex, right? Or teasing, I guess?
I got reasons why I tease them, boys just come and go like seasons.
Is it really teasing though? I don't think so, because that would imply that what Fergie's doing is the slightest bit attractive, and it's not.
Fergalicious definition make them boys go crazy.
No surprises here, Fergie is just absolutely obnoxious in her performance, going on and on about how delicious she is, comparing herself indirectly to candy. This isn't titillating, that's arrogant. Not only that, but there are various small issues I have with her performance that make her even more unbearable, like the stuttering on the second verse.
Fergalicious
It's hard to make stuttering not grating, and this definitely does not succeed.
Plus, there's that recurring rock bit.
I put your boy on rock.
Did you really need to boost up the backing vocals for that? It's a nonsense phrase about how you can supposedly take my man. And then there's this line that comes shortly after it.
And he be lining down the block.
To me, that bit just sounds badly spliced from two different takes. It just jumps up all of a sudden.
And then, surprisingly on the bridge, she actually sounds okay.
The buzzing instruments get swapped out for some decent sounding guitars, even if the percussion does kinda overpower it, and Fergie actually starts to sound good. Her vocal melodies on the bridge are pleasant and kinda sexy.
But of course, it couldn't last long, because then we got will.i.am spelling out words.
This is filler through and through, because you have no idea how to link the bridge to the final verse. Though the final verse is actually not that bad.
All the time I turn around, brothers gather around, always looking at me up and down.
Fergie actually shows some rapping skill here, and her content becomes a little more self-aware. But that outro, where Will starts spelling again, come on, we should be done with this. I like to think I have a high tolerance for repetition in music, but even I find this incredibly grating and unnecessary.
Congratulations, Peas, you made a song worse than my humps. And now I never want to eat candy again.
I'm a real producer and you just a piano man.
Number 5!
With some songs, it's easy to explain why they're terrible. This one, not so much.
First things first, this song samples the Lonely Goat Herd from The Sound of Music, and that fact is the source of most of the problems with this song. Now, to be clear, I'm not that familiar with The Sound of Music. I saw it once over a decade ago in choir class and never again, but even I can tell that this is an absolute butchering of the source material. The first time I heard this, the sample made me confused, but intrigued, with even the yodeling promising something kinda cool.
Unfortunately, though, it leads to Gwen Stefani rapping.
The beat becomes percussion only on the first verse, which is no surprise coming from the Neptunes, and it isn't even inherently bad, but Gwen's speak singing just makes it a chore to listen through, especially when hints of the sample come back that clash horribly with this sassy attitude. I'd say the fuzzed out bass on the pre-chorus actually fits better, though I find that irritating as well. And just like the last song, she's trying to be a tease with these lyrics. I'll say it again, that doesn't work when what you're presenting is unattractive.
But at the end of the day, the main reason this song is bad is because of how it uses the sample.
Back when this song was new, Gwen defended it from critics by saying that fans of Sound of Music got it, which I don't buy for a second. Again, I'm not overly familiar with the source material, but I don't think there's any thematic similarities between a song about a church girl connecting with a large family of children and teaching them music, and a song where Gwen Stefani essentially flaunts her fashion line.
This beat is for the clubs.
Gwen, I can assure you that this beat is not for the clubs. After all, people don't go to the clubs to watch 60s musicals.
Plus, it is just amazing how bad the sample fits in with this beat, especially in the second verse when it plays alongside the marching percussion, and it highlights just how offensive this all is. You take a song from a timeless, wholesome musical and turn it into a dated mess with toxic attitudes and irritating noises.
You got to let the beat get under your skin.
Well, if that's not an admission that this song is garbage, I don't know what is.
And it kinda irritates me that this was released as a single before The Sweet Escape, one of her best songs. You had a good thing going that would become your second most successful song, but this failed experiment of a track is how you wanted to start your album cycle. I don't know what you were thinking, Gwen, but at least you got back on track eventually. Number 4. From what I can tell, 2007 must have been some kind of crunk boom. This list is full of one-hit wonder crunk songs, and yet not a single one even has Lil Jon's vocals.
He did produce at least one song on this list, but
This is just the beat to Snap Your Fingers again, only worse. So yeah, that's not gonna cut it. So, without a force of personality like Lil Jon, jeez, these songs are just boring. Same repetitive crap, uncharismatic performers, and nothing beyond the chorus that actually sticks with you.
I could fill half this list with awful crunk songs if I really wanted to, but that would get boring after a while, so instead I limited myself to just one. The absolute worst that the genre had to offer this year. Boots and Rap! Not just a 2017 thing anymore.
Obviously, the beat to this is just obnoxious. The main component is, of course, that flute melody, which is so atonal and flat that it might as well be a metronome. This makes Mask Off sound like Flight of the Bumblebees in comparison.
And I don't expect Jethro Tull or anything that complex out of a crunk song, but at least try to have an interesting melody, come on. Represent my instrument well.
And the rest of the beat is not much better. That string synth thing in the background is also pretty atonal. There's more variety in the timpani drums, an instrument that by design only allows you to play 2 or 3 different notes in a song. I'm guessing producer Lil J wasn't exactly a good band student in high school.
And then you get the lyrics.
Look at them hips. I like how she rock it.
Yeah, no surprise, it's a sex song. Whoopee. And I know that makes me sound like a prude, but it's this kind of blatant objectification that just makes me roll my eyes and feel secondhand embarrassment.
Got me hard in the past.
I didn't need you to tell me you had an erection, dude. I kinda just assumed that already.
And while the male rappers on this song are certainly terrible, I think the first girl actually has the worst verse on the song overall.
Now I got 32 flavors of that bootylicious bubblegum.
On top of having an annoying voice, every single one of her bars is some sort of double entendre that involves candy, and that fact kinda makes me sick to my stomach.
Soda poppy, watch the sizzle, man, it right here for shizzle.
When your one verse about comparing sex to candy makes me cringe more than an entire song built around that concept, you know you have failed.
Third verse, I think, is supposed to be a little scrappy, but he might as well be another part of Crime Mob because he has nothing. Fourth verse is another girl, not nearly as bad as the one from the second verse, thank God.
Big boy pimpin', poppin', dippin', now tell me I'm not the baddest.
Okay? You ain't the baddest. In fact, you're probably the best one here.
Fifth guy is not even worth mentioning. Just between this and the beat for Juju on that beat, I think it's clear that there's nothing good associated with this group. It makes me happy they're pretty much forgotten nowadays and that this was barely a hit to begin with. Everything I say about this is meaningless anyway. Eat Arby's. Number 3. I get nostalgic when revisiting these older year-end lists for a number of reasons. Some songs I heard on the radio, in a commercial, from Guitar Hero, from YouTube, or at a school dance. More often than not, it's a good kind of nostalgia, but sometimes, like with Rockstar, it's more of a nostalgia bomb than anything.
And surprisingly enough, this next song is actually quite nostalgic to me. In probably the dumbest way possible.
So, for one reason or another, I remember hearing a bit of the chorus of this song in some YouTube videos. I wish I could tell you what kind, maybe weird Simpsons videos or other stupid things, but I can barely remember. And yet I never actually figured out what this song was until last year when Mr. 96 mentioned it in his Worst of 2009 video.
Hooray! I found crap!
Surprise, surprise, this sounds dated as hell. And again, old music, I get it. But even when I heard that chorus in middle school, I thought it was the cheapest thing imaginable. From the whistling synths that sound like they have no idea what they're actually doing to the fuzzed out bass, I just couldn't believe this was a professional product that someone decided was finished and ready for release. It's an absolute joke.
Which, now that I think about it, is probably why I kept hearing this song in those joke videos I would watch.
But of course, the one who comes off as being the biggest joke of them all is Jim Jones himself. Simply put, this guy doesn't sound ready for prime time. He seems like the kind of guy who wants to be intimidating, and in theory, he should be. His voice is very bassy and has some gruffness here and there. He could very easily be a Rick Ross type, but his voice is just weak. Like, you know how when you get sick, you get a bunch of crud in your throat and your voice is essentially getting filtered by that crud? That's how Jim Jones sounds to me. Like he's got a cold at all times.
And hopefully that's the grossest that I ever get on this channel.
But it is that lack of intimidating presence that really hurts a lot of his content. You know, the same old luxury porn you're used to hearing about. For all his talk about bawling, he ultimately comes off as a poser.
But don't worry, because just like Migos, he's got ad-libs. Lots and lots of ad-libs. Too bad you can't hear them, though.
Did you hear him say that he buys foreign cars? Because I certainly didn't.
So I speed through life like it's no tomorrow.
You're speeding through life, huh? Honestly, with how sluggish and out of breath you sound, I don't buy that for 1 second.
But since you insist that you're speeding, let me just write you up a ticket. There you go. Have a good day, sir.
Jim Jones would later have a second hit with Pop Champagne in 2009, and you may think that song is worse, but at least it's more interesting than this boring, cheaply made flexing anthem.
Somehow, in a year full of derivative crunk songs, this still stands out as the worst rap song of the year. What an accomplishment. We don't miss you, Jim Jones.
Sexy, never left, and why is everybody on my
Number 2.
So, I feel like I'm pretty lenient on rock music, probably because it's what I grew up on.
And going through a year-end of this era is a treat for me due to the increased prominence rock had in the mainstream. There's a lot of songs from this era I consider classics to this day, and I'll even stick up for some songs that aren't exactly popular with some people. Hate Me by Blue October? Didn't hate it. Scars by Papa Roach? Not a fan, but you could do worse. Addicted by Saving Abel? It's got its charm.
And then there's a band that I can't believe the general public ever gravitated to. Twice, even. Last year you heard Rodrigo rant about these guys, but now it's my turn. Hinder sucks!
I think you can do much better than me.
I've never seen a more honest song title in all my life.
Lips of an Angel from 2006 and also 2007 was a terrible song. It sounds ugly, it has ugly attitudes towards cheating and women, and it was basic as hell in its composition.
Hinder's follow-up, Better Than Me, is basically the same song in that respect. Only somehow 1,000 times worse.
Better Than Me is a song reflecting on a past relationship, one that's mournful and regretful, on an album called Extreme Behavior, I should point out. In it, Austin Winkler thinks back to a girl he had and admits that he made mistakes and hopes that the girl is able to do better without him holding her back.
At least, that's what Winkler wants you to think.
When you really dig into the lyrics, this song's premise completely falls apart, because all throughout, Winkler goes on and on about how he misses her, naming specific details such as her hair in his face, which is just gross, as is talking about how her innocence tastes.
And this on its own wouldn't even be that much of a problem, until you realize that he never once touches on the negative.
For a song like this to work, where you're exposing yourself as not good enough for someone, you kinda need to dig into why that is. But aside from one incredibly vague line in the first verse about lying to her, there's nothing here that talks about his weakness. As such, this song starts feeling less mature and more like a guilt trip. It's ultimately insincere and manipulative, as the intention seems to be to make him seem pathetic so the girl will feel sorry for him and take him back, which is infuriating to no end.
Compare this to When I Was Your Man by Bruno Mars, a very underrated gem from 2013 in my opinion.
Same bed, but it feels just a little bit bigger now.
This song is basically the same premise as Better Than Me. Bruno feels remorse after a breakup for what he feels he could have done better. He recognizes and explicitly talks about moments where he ignored her, not taking her to dances he knows she'd like, and letting his ego come first in the relationship. And by the end of the song, he wishes the girl luck with her new boyfriend, hoping he'll be what he couldn't be. And it's very heartfelt and sincere. Henry Winkler, on the other hand, is half-assing this, and it shows not just in the writing, but also the presentation.
Simply put, I don't want to hear about a breakup set to sludgy, sappy post-grunge.
I mean, it adds some acoustic guitars for some parts, but it doesn't make it sound any more heartfelt, mostly because it's paired with Henry Winkler's over-singing. He has an absolutely horrendous voice. One of the worst in rock, and that is saying something. He sounds like he's out of his range, blowing out his voice on the chorus, and in general just making this unbearable.
It's not somber, it's not heartbreaking, it's not good sounding. It's just ugly. And it's been on my nerves since I first heard it. I'll take Lips of an Angel over this any day of the week. And before number one, basically just the crunk songs I didn't talk about before.
This very narrowly missed the list proper, because that chorus is one of the most hellish things I've heard in music.
And T-Pain gives one of his all-time worst performances. I mean, at least that I've heard.
This is the sound of someone blowing out their autotune. Oh my god. I don't particularly enjoy Rihanna when she's clearly checked out, and it also makes me incredibly uncomfortable to hear her say the word Shawty. Yet another reason this word needed to die.
Starts in my toes and I crinkle my nose.
In addition to some classic rock stations, I grew up with this one adult alternative station that would play this often, which is probably why I find this so insufferable. It would probably be more insufferable if it was as bubbly as the title claims, but this just isn't trying in the slightest. The birth of a legend, and by that I mean a punching bag.
I like where we are.
To be honest, I don't hate this song at all, but its existence feels wrong. So wrong.
I mean, I believe that someone would make something like this in 2007, but people actually bought it enough to make it a hit? Oh my god, that's actually kind of amazing.
In a year of one-hit wonder crunk artists, Unk dares to be different, by having 2 hits this year. Though Walk It Out was also pretty bad, I gave the edge to Two Step being worse for its stuttering synths annoying the hell out of me. Just looking at this kid's name, I was hopeful that he would be a country singer since this year-end only has 2 country songs. But nope, more crunk, and from a guy who can't even stay on the beat. Joy.
I'm in the DJ booth taking pictures with the DJ.
Chris Brown is auto-tuned as hell, but T-Pain isn't auto-tuned at all. How do you mess something up this badly? If you remember this song, it's probably for that "if you ain't got no money, take your broke ass home" line, which is confusing. Very, very confusing.
Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no.
Probably the most insufferable reggae song I've ever heard. If there's any one-hit wonder rap song from this year that you remember, it's probably this one, mostly for Mims' overconfidence that is absolutely hilarious in hindsight.
This is why I'm hot. I don't gotta rap. I could sell a mill saying nothing on the track.
That's basically an admission that no one is interested in what you have to say and only cared about this song for the beat. God, what an idiot.
We ain't here to hurt nobody. So give it to me, give it to me.
And now, number 1.
Work your body. So give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. To the left, to the left.
Beyonce. One of the most powerful women in music, and probably one of the most powerful women of our time in general. Many in my circle will tell you she's had her ups and downs, but ultimately she's made her place in music history and she isn't going anywhere. But why bring her up leading up to a number 1 spot for a worst list for this year? After all, neither of her hits this year are even that bad. Well, it all comes down to influence. Given that she's one of the most popular female R&B artists of her time, it's hard to be in her lane without being influenced by her.
Which brings us to one such artist, the former Mrs. Future, Ciara.
I'm looking for somebody I can call.
Now, I've hinted here and there about how I don't particularly care for Ciara, but I've never been able to figure out why. Is it because of her voice, the production she uses, her lyrics? I have no idea, even to this day.
But even with my distaste for her, I never once thought that she would actually make one of my worst lists, let alone at the very top. After all, her music wasn't that bad, right? And it wasn't that bad in an interesting way either, right? At least, until today. That's right. Ciara made If I Were a Boy before Beyonce did. And she did it even worse.
Coming into this song blind is an interesting experience, or at least it was for me. You're greeted by these dark strings, which sound promising until the fuzzy synths come through and start giving you a feeling of dread. And that's a feeling that continues throughout the rest of the song as the fuzz and percussion drown out the strings and just in general sound awful. You get Ciara trying to assert herself, but failing when she messes up her cadence and falls off the meter.
Security codes on everything on vibrate, sleep, hold, don't never ring.
Why they didn't try to rewrite some of the lyrics to make this fit, I'll never know.
So, yeah, it sounds bad. Horrendous even. But it wouldn't be close to number 1 if it weren't for the lyrics.
And the thing is, it would be so easy for Ciara to have the higher ground in this situation. After all, she's fed up with her boyfriend's bad habits, most importantly, his tendency to sleep around without regard for her feelings and ignoring her phone calls. With this setup, she could have had me on her side.
But by the end of the chorus, that gets thrown completely out the window.
Sometimes I wish I could act like a boy.
Ciara, you made the premise of this song incredibly sexist with just one line. You're a moron. When I think about why this is wrong, I mostly refer back to Todd in the Shadow's comments on If I Were a Boy in his Worst of 2009 video. Primarily the fact that this insinuates that all boys are scummy, lazy cheaters who only want to hurt the girls they're with. And it's teaching this destructive moral to impressionable girls who will use this as an excuse to be distrustful of any boy they meet. Yes, boys like this do exist, but assuming that all boys are like that is frustrating and scary as hell. And keep in mind, this was on the same album as a song where Ciara wants to be saved by someone like Superman. Just let that sink in. But let me guess, that was a moment of weakness and this is who you really are, some femme fatale who eats men up like it's nothing.
And I can see how people would defend this song by pointing out that music has a history of misogyny in it and that one song that reverses the gender roles shouldn't be a cause for alarm, right? Well, there are some holes with that defense.
Songs that have an ugly attitude towards either sex are abhorrent, no doubt about it. But in this case, let's do what Ciara wants us to do and reverse the roles. If this was a song about a boy airing out his grievances about girls and wishing that the roles were reversed, that would not go well with anyone.
But because she's throwing some good-for-nothing schmuck out on his ass, it's justified. Girl power, right?
Sometimes I wish I could act like a boy.
And all the little details that try to drive home this diatribe against men honestly makes it worse. From the harmonization on the chorus to that deep voice that plays right after the chorus. This bit is a playground taunt through and through.
And just when you thought this couldn't get any more horrific, you get to the instrumental break on this bridge.
If you needed one more swift kick in the ears, this is definitely it. Just, how bad does this guy need to feel for what he did? I'm honestly starting to side with him now, and he cheated!
If I played you, would you like that? Have friends, would you like that?
Also, Ciara's rapping is just awful. And what it all adds up to is one of the ugliest songs I think I've ever heard. Few even come close.
Misinjury is real, and it's in our pop music. And Ciara, you're officially on the shit list. I'm done. Best list coming soon. Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, please comment, like, and subscribe. And I finally got Final Cut Pro, which is huge for me, and hopefully some kind of increase in quality shows as a result. Feels good to make the switch. And bye!
Times Square can shine as bright as you.